Hello, my name is Morten Elvang. I just arrived in beautiful Amsterdam for the Strategy Execution Forum tomorrow, and this is a rehearsal of my presentation. Today is the 20th of March, and it's actually my mom's birthday. I'm going to talk about open strategy and make a case for open strategy. I'm not actually going to sell this, and I'm not trying to convince you, but I will ask if you are seeing some of the same things as we are seeing. So the way it's titled is How Digitization, Hope and Fear Invite to an Open and Emerging Approach to Strategy. I will follow roughly the structure as we go along to try to cover the why and the what and the how. And the how includes some very practical ideas for you to get started should you be interested in this. And we will end also by summarizing the takeaways. Before we get started, a bit about open strategy, which is actually a rather old discipline. So basically, open strategy means transparency and inclusion, meaning that you are more open about what the strategy is and you are more willing to include a broader set of people in the strategy process. Strategy process you can typically see as formulating the strategy and executing the strategy, which is also how we see it. Traditionally, open strategy has been more focused on the strategy formulation, not so much on the execution. And this is where we will be a bit different because we are actually doing what we call taking a complex view on this, which means that if you, for example, look at this in terms of the Kinevin model, you would normally find that strategy processes are assuming an ordered world, whereas we will take a different stand and assume a complex world. We did something similar last year at the Strategy Execution Forum, where we looked at collaborative lean portfolio management, which today is embedded in what we call open strategy. To warm you up a little bit, here is an example, the very familiar case of Nokia mobile phones, a place where I worked myself. And let's not dwell too much on it here. The point I want to make on the fear side of things is that how do you actually avoid becoming the next Nokia or Blockbuster or another one from the name of spectacular business blunders? What do you need to do is what we will talk about. And the thing that's interesting to observe about when things starts to go bad is that there's actually no lower limit for how bad it can go. Just like business opportunity itself, there's no upper limit to how well you can do in business. On a symmetrical argument, there is simply no lower limit for how bad things can go. And people tend to overlook this. So typically what you see is that when it really starts to go bad, things happen much faster than you expect, and it's much worse than you expect. So part of what we talk about is also how you can avoid things like this. So coming a bit back to the invitation from the beginning, inviting you to see what we see, we will start by basically giving a few things away and then follow up on that in a later part of the conversation. And I apologize for my beautiful face being covering some of the slides, but I'll try to mention the essential parts which are missing. So when we talk about digitization, fear, and hope as three different things, you can say digitization at the moment is of course very dominating for many businesses. We believe that there is a situation now where you can start thinking of digitization and technology in a wider sense as something that actually liberates rather than constrains. And it's a matter of the industry being where it is. It's a matter of technologies for automation, augmentation, the generative AI really kicking in and making a difference. So what does it actually mean then when technology sets you free? How do you respond to that? What does it mean for the organization? That's a force you need to respond to. Then I think few would disagree that things go very fast in the current economy. So we will talk about strategy as emergent, and we will talk about turbulence, which basically means that you would need to re-strategize, re-plan more frequently to get a bearing of where you are going. Then finally, on the hope side, more and more, it's an argument from the World Economic Forum 2023, which I heard referred. And I think it's right that more and more people are looking to companies to save the world. So with that actually comes heightened expectations. There's also a few other things at play, but there is really heightened expectations for the ethical and moral conduct of companies happening at the moment, which is another force that you need to respond to. So then, without trying to make this a logical argument, you can say, what does this actually mean? And what we believe is that it argues for a necessity to shift to much more openness. You can say it's a claim, it's something that we believe we have seen. So what does that mean is that there needs to be a shift where you actually look more at avoiding putting yourself in unfavorable situations, which is an imperative for resilience, which is again a component of longevity for any organization. We also believe that there is a need for broader involvement in the strategy process, which in part is enabled by digitization, both because it sets the organization free and of course because digitization itself can help involve a larger group of people in the strategy process in an organized fashion. Then we believe that there will be a shift in time perspective from on cadence to on demand, which basically means that you would need to act on things as they emerge, not when it's convenient for you. So it becomes what you can call the alignment paradox, that you align so that you can realign. Whereas traditionally we think of strategy and strategy execution as something where you're aligning execution to strategy. Now you actually need to align for another purpose, an additional purpose, so that you can change your mind in a coordinated fashion as often as you want. And then finally, and again, this is not in a logical order, but these are significant observations or claims, if you say. What this actually means is that there is a shift in balance between strategizing and execution, where strategizing used to really be the one that's driving execution. You talk about cascading approaches, etc. It a bit turns around because emergence comes from the execution, which in the future will inform the strategy itself. And this actually will change everything almost, which is in the area you can't see. There's another interesting thing with the liberalization of working people by technology, is that it makes an ambition of what we will call 100% hot hands possible. You can basically make a distinction how many people are working with internal coordination, how many people are production or client facing, and what's the ratio. And in today's economy and with today's technology aids, 100% hot hands is not an impossibility. So to give you an idea of what this would look like in what is the shift we see from taking a complex stance, is that yes, you still need to drive boldly for value. That's always been an imperative for competitive advantage. Value drive, value flow, value delivery. It's all about the customer-centric approach to developing value. The new thing that comes up is that you also, with equal attention, need to make sure that you manage at a speed where you can afford to lose, and you avoid unnecessary failure or unnecessary risks that could lead to failure. So you basically, to remain resilient, you need to progress in a way where you give equal attention to driving value and avoiding failure. Here's a look at how you could imagine the strategy process. I hope you're still with me. So you could think of strategy like painting a picture. or painting a map of where to go while you are actually trying to stay on the road as you get there. So from the green left to the red and amber right, you have on the left sort of the undisturbed, clear horizon view from a mountaintop. No doubt about anything. It's very clear where you are and where you're heading. Then gradually you can say landscape is shifting and things are a little bit more up and down and maybe there is less view to the horizon, but you can still see the sun and you still have a map. Then you can imagine a situation where you get to the more bumpy, curly roads, maybe going towards the beach, not sure exactly which turn to take. And it's actually quite difficult to get a bearing, but at least you have tools that can guide you in the right direction. Potentially, hope not, you might suddenly find yourself underwater, and in that moment, it doesn't really matter where you're going. Everybody knows that you got to get out of the water, and you might even need some help for that. Also, there are situations, it can be in between all of this, where you're not necessarily sure of where to go, and you can be a little bit confused about what's the situation. So if you think of strategy as something you do in these different situations, then let's have a look. I think it would actually be quite wonderful if you would always have the clear view from the mountain, and you want to be aligned for everyone to work on the same goals. But there is a little cloud on the sky, if not a lightning. So we know from practical experience that a lot of people don't actually know or understand strategy. Again, my face is a bit in the way here, but I think you get it. And then when you look at the group of leaders, it's about half who have difficulties remembering the strategy. So even if we actually have the best of conditions to plan and set our way forward, actually a lot of people are not on a daily basis orientating themselves to that. So maybe where you are could be a bit more like this, which means that maybe a little bit too dramatic, but at least you're in a place where you don't necessarily want to be. And we have some evidence to back that. For example, PricewaterhouseCoopers issued in 2017 a report related to strategy, where they talk about leaders knowing that there is a problem. And we also know this from our work, is that it's a bit like you have tried a lot to improve the situation around strategy and strategy execution. And after a while, you just learn to live with how it is, and it's good enough to get you going. Leading thinkers in strategy, like Roger Martin, directly says that 25% of companies do not have a useful strategy. It actually makes us wonder that potentially, if they are also having a bit of struggle, survival mode, then perhaps the sort of collective aspiration of getting out of the water is what keeps them aligned, meaning that there's a lot of alignment in the ambition to survive. We also know, and this has been, for example, backed by data from Bain and company, that a lot of leaders feel constrained mainly by internal complexity. So what's actually holding them back to reach their ambitions is not what they can do in the open market. It's more what they can't do because of what's already going on at home. So potentially, you actually would like to be more in the middle, which meaning taking a complex and an approach that accepts emergence to dealing with your strategy. So that means that you don't want too much strategy, but you don't want too little strategy either. You want to have just enough that it can keep you going where you want to go. And in this situation, you need to be aligned not only for people to deliver impact at scale, but also that you can do the coordinated shifts when some new information is facing you. What would such an approach look like? And what would it take to get started is what we will look at next after a little intermezzo, because we want you to meet some new friends, the emergent phenomena that you see when you start looking for them. So you have on the left the bubble, which means things which have been going on too long and shouldn't have. So the Emperor's New Clothes from the Danish fairy tale teller Hans Christian Andersen is a good example of that, if you remember it. But it's basically things which have been going on too long and have become too unfavorable without anyone intervening that suddenly grows on you. Then you have the sudden external shifts. COVID is one. And then you have the rapid, which is a stroke of serendipity, new opportunity that suddenly is in your face. And again, you are spotting these while trying to stay on the road, and each of these observations might influence your preferred course of direction. Also, some of these are actually quite significant, either deficits or opportunities. So we believe we can say that this is your new $1 billion hobby. Then about strategy. Well, let's not dwell too much on this. I mean, everybody has their own favorite, and the world is not in agreement on what good strategy is. But we see it as a process of concentrating force at your opponent's weakest point, and as your best plan for survival and prosperity. And with that, I think we are quite close to what some other leading strategy thinkers think. The interesting thing is that the world is in larger agreement about what bad strategy is, but let's leave that for another conversation. Then open strategy. Well, open strategy is strategy too, but it has the added objective of avoiding doing wrong things when you could have known better. So that basically means that you want to keep your options open and you want to repaint as reality is emerging, is the added ambition. So while you drive for value with the traditional approach, in the open strategy approach, it's all about making sure that you don't drive yourself into the ocean if you by any means can avoid it. So traditionally, like we mentioned in the beginning, open strategy has been about inclusion and transparency. If you take a complex view, by implication, adaptability becomes part of the equation, because it doesn't really work that you look for things that should change your plans if you're not actually changing them. Then how do you work with this? So what we have found in the work with collaborative lean portfolio management, and which we will be a bit brief on in this presentation, is that there are actually three things which are really important. And these are overlays to your existing organization, not changes to that organization. So one is to have a constant focus on where you're heading. We call that clarity on intent. What direction are you aiming for at the moment? And when that's changing, what does it mean for the new direction you are taking? Then we have another collaboration that we talk about, build fitness or organizational health, McKinsey would call it. How well are you equipped to carry your own ambitions? How well can you carry your strategy? This is a really important activity to look at regularly. So basically, do you have the right team for your ambition, or anything you should change to that? And then the final one, alignment of contributions, is a recurring thing. The two others are also recurring, but this one would be recurring probably on a certain cadence, where you would do a reconciliation of what you intend to do versus what contributions you are actually seeing in the organization, and asking how well does that add up. So if you check that up a little bit more, you can basically say that these three collaborations are to surface tensions. You remember your new $1 billion hobby, and the additional questions we will ask on the right-hand side would be from the things which are emerging, what might cause you to change your mind, and should you decide to change your mind, how well would things add up then before or after these changes? Then the thing that you can't really see in the lower right corner is the question, do we have a useful collaborative structure? I mean, are we our best selves when it comes to collaboration? On the left-hand side, we have the emergence, the bubbles and the thunderbolts and the rapids that you remember from earlier. And what we have learned is that by making sure that you have a strategy conversation in a very clear perspective, actually that's an environment that fosters emergence. We know that from things like software inspections, where it has been documented with statistics by the people working with that discipline. So while it seems almost paradoxically to meet in a conversation where everybody is well prepared and, as we call it, bring no surprises and have the conversation, that's actually the fertile soil that best gives emergence of new ideas, because you can see things in a very clear perspective. So you can see what you have been overlooking, or you can see if from your perspective something doesn't add up from how you understand the world. Then if we just look at the contribution alignment, how would you set something like this up? If some of you are familiar with the QBR, quarterly business reviews, or from the scaled agile framework, the PI planning, then it's actually quite similar. So the way we set it up, and we will be again a bit brief here, but the way we set it up is that it's a face-to-face meeting. You would invite a very broad and diverse set of participants to listen to these conversations. You would ask a few selected accountable people to tell about their contribution. So basically, as you can see in the middle box to the left, how do you understand the objectives you are delivering to? What does that mean for the roadmap? How would that look in a time-wise progression? What has actually been delivered here and now? And is there anything else anybody needs to know or worth knowing, including, do you depend on someone else to do what you are planning to do? Then other participants will listen and ask a few questions for this. And while everybody has had a chance to give their say, then in the end, there will be an open space or a bazaar where people have chance to meet and follow up on things that has been emerging for them, and double check if others have been seeing the same things. So if you look again to how would you get this going, you can progress a bit like this over a period. In this case, we talk about 9 months. Actually, you can get going much faster if you want, but if you are not in a rush and have time to do things properly, then a natural progression would be something like establishing sponsorship, making sure that you have a useful collaborative structure to start with, set up the first conversation, contribution, alignment conversation, have everybody prepare for that, get that going, for example, on a monthly cadence. There would be a recurring activity before and after that event to bring clarity to the strategic intent, making sure that everybody knows where we are heading. And there will be a recurring and actually multi-dimensional activity to look at fitness for purpose, which is organizational integrity, organizational health, and immensely important to make sure that that's in place. This also works as a bit of an antidote for bureaucracy, overload, the more negative sides of the organization. And when you get started with something like this, it's not unusual to see close to 20% of activities cancelled or parked up front, simply because they, in the context of other options, you would say on an opportunity cost assessment, doesn't make any sense to starve out more important things. Then, while this was a bit of the big picture, what you can do at home if you really want to get this going, you can look at 3 things which all fits the 3 collaborations. As one exercise you can do, you can pick all your strategies. It's not unlikely for bigger organizations to have several strategies, like a partnership strategy and a sustainability strategy and a technology strategy, all of that. But all of this is guiding your execution. So to do a boil down of those, for example, in the form of OKRs, is a really useful activity. And what we have found is that more often than not, when you start this activity, it actually leads to immediate revision and clarification of significant parts of those strategies that was assumed clear to everyone. Half-a-day workshop will do miracles. If you want to be thorough and, for example, combine this with something like Jira Align and really put your OKRs in there, it might take a bit longer, but then you would also have them documented and digitized. We already talked about the contribution alignment. And then the final thing, which for me is sometimes even a bit fun, is to have the conversation with the team if they have a useful collaborative structure or not. What I often do is simply to ask the question and leave it at that, and encourage people to figure out what does that question even mean for us. How can we have a useful conversation around whether we have a useful collaborative structure or not. It's happened at times that people tell us when we talk about this that, well, it's too early. We are simply not ready for this conversation. Well, what we would say is that when is the time right? And what do we lose by trying? And maybe if you want to add it a notch, you can say, what if we could prevent just one disaster, as is hidden behind my face? Sorry about that. So imagine we could prevent just one disaster by being a bit more diligent in looking for emergent things, something that might even have been with us for years that we have not reacted on. I mean, Nokia didn't fall over the day the smartphone was launched. That was actually a year-long progression of events. Could we have done something had we been Nokia to intervene and change the course of actions and not have things end like they did? So time to wrap up. Takeaways. Bit busy slide. I hope you will forgive me, but we wanted to make a case for open strategy and not to sell it, but to share what we have seen and ask, do you see the same things? So on the big scale, digitization, fear and hope. Well, we see that digitization now offers new and needed degrees of freedoms. It literally liberates the organization if you play it the right way, and it's a huge antidote against bureaucracy. If you remember from Gary Hamel, he has been for tens of years talking about bureaucracy eating any gains of productivity in the world in an almost like balanced fashion. We believe that digitization is now finally in a place where it can help us break free from that and really increase productivity. Figures from Accenture published last year suggest that as much as 80% of manual tasks can be automated or augmented, probably even more with the use of generative AI. Then there's the fear thing. How do we avoid becoming the next blockbuster or whatever is your favorite? How can we stay aligned? How can we stay in agreement of what we see so that we can realign when needed, which is a bit of a paradox that you are aligned to realign. What does it take to execute these orchestrated pivots, which is actually the essence of business agility? Then finally, for the hope of the world, you have your new $1 billion hobby, keeping an eye out on the emergent events, making sure that your organization is doing the best it can for the people who work there and for the planet that you depend on is part of the job and driven by the new forces, new expectations for companies. Then again, a few recaps. Remember the duality between driving and avoiding, managing at the speed you can afford to lose, the need to broaden and open collaboration, not because people are nosy and insist on knowing, but actually because more eyes see better. And a lot of the emergent features you will not get from your AI system or analytics. They will come to you by people observing those and asking a question like the little boy in the emperor's new clothes about what's going on. And before you know it, you will see that maybe somebody needs to put their clothes on. There's something which is not as it should be. And then finally, sorry, hidden by me, strategy on demand, execution becomes the dominating part. A huge shift in the dynamics in the strategy execution equation that shifts the power to the execution, because that's where you have the emergence that then informs the strategy. Thank you.